The restaurant glowed with soft amber lights, the kind of place where laughter was hushed and wine was poured as if it were liquid gold. Julia adjusted her crimson dress nervously in the mirror across the bar. Her client's instructions replayed in her head. Make sure his date doesn't go well. Embarrass him if you have to. Just ruin it. It wasn't the strangest job she'd ever taken, but it ranked high on the morally questionable list. She needed the money. Rent was overdue, and her brother's college fees weren't going to pay themselves. But still, ruining a stranger's night didn't sit right in her chest. Then she saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, in a dark suit that seemed sculpted for him alone. He sat at the center table, checking his watch, an air of control around him that drew every curious eye in the room. His features were striking, but it was the tiredness in his expression that caught Julia. This wasn't a man eager for romance, this was someone who'd been dragged into the idea of love. That's him, the client's text had said earlier. Single dad, CEO, smug as hell, knock him down a peg. Julia smoothed her dress and walked toward his table. Ethan Cole, she asked, letting her voice dip in feigned surprise. His steel gray eyes lifted to hers. He looked confused, wary. Do I know you? She smiled, sliding into the empty chair before he could object. Not yet. He blinked, clearly thrown off. I'm actually waiting for someone. I know, Julia interrupted sweetly. Your date. Unfortunately, she won't be coming. His brows pulled together. Excuse me. Julia leaned forward, lowering her voice. She's not the type you think she is. I thought you deserved to know before you wasted your evening. A muscle ticked in his jaw. And who exactly are you to decide that? The weight of his gaze nearly pinned her to the chair. This wasn't some shallow playboy who'd laugh it off. His presence was sharp, intimidating, yet magnetic. Julia forced herself not to falter. Someone doing you a favor, she replied. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the clink of glassware and soft jazz in the background. Then, unexpectedly, Ethan chuckled. It wasn't warm, more incredulous, but it softened his features in a way that caught Julia off guard. You barged into my evening, told me my date isn't showing up, and now you're what, filling in? His tone carried an edge of sarcasm, but there was something else beneath it. Curiosity. Julia hesitated. The script she'd prepared, spilling wine on him, pretending to be a jealous ex, all those ridiculous tactics, suddenly seemed absurd. Instead, she found herself shrugging. Maybe, she said, a small smile tugging her lips. Ethan studied her for a long, assessing moment. You're either insane, or very brave. Julia tilted her head. Which one would make you stay and find out? He leaned back in his chair, his lips curving into the faintest smirk. Both. And just like that, the plan shifted. She was supposed to sabotage him. Instead, she was tangled in something else entirely, a dangerous, undeniable spark. Julia swallowed, realizing the biggest problem wasn't whether she'd ruin his night. It was whether she'd survive her own heart in the process. Ethan Cole wasn't a man who liked surprises. His entire empire was built on precision. Numbers that lined up, schedules that didn't bend, negotiations that ended on his terms. But tonight, this woman in the crimson dress, sliding into his evening as if she belonged there, was the first surprise in a long time he didn't immediately want to reject. Still, he didn't trust her. Julia lifted her glass of water, pretending calm, but her pulse betrayed her. She hadn't expected him to invite her to stay. In fact, she'd counted on being dismissed after delivering her warning. But instead, he was watching her as if she were a puzzle he intended to solve. So, Ethan began, his voice smooth but edged with curiosity. You claim my date isn't coming. Tell me why. Julia forced a casual shrug. Because she's not the type of woman you need. And you know what type one need. His gray eyes sharpened, narrowing slightly. Danger, her instinct screamed. The man sitting across from her wasn't some playboy with a fragile ego. He was sharp, calculating. One wrong word and he'd see through her. She leaned in, meeting his gaze without flinching. I know what it looks like when someone's about to waste their time. His lips curved, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Interesting. You walk in off the street, hijack my evening, and now you're the expert on me. Maybe I am, Julia said, the confidence in her tone surprising even herself. Before he could respond, a sharp, feminine voice cut through the hum of the restaurant. "Ethan." Julia froze. Her stomach dropped as a statuesque brunette in a designer dress walked toward their table, heels clicking against the marble floor. His real blind date. Ethan's brow arched as he looked from the newcomer to Julia, then back again. "Ah, so she does exist." The brunette gave Julia a once-over, lips twisting into a polite but pointed smile. "And you are." Julia's throat went dry. She hadn't planned for this. The easiest route would be to excuse herself and vanish, but Ethan's expectant gaze pinned her in place. He wanted an explanation, and walking away would only make her look guilty. Julia forced a smile. "A friend." Ethan leaned back, arms crossing over his chest, the picture of amusement. "A friend who told me you weren't coming." The brunette frowned. "Why would you say that?" Julia's cheeks burned. She scrambled for words, but Ethan lifted a hand, silencing the awkward exchange. His voice was cool, commanding. "Ladies, let's not argue in the middle of the restaurant." "Julia, is it?" Her heart skipped. He'd caught her name when she'd ordered at the bar earlier. "Yes," she said softly. He studied her for a moment before turning to the brunette. "Why don't you give us a moment?" The woman blinked, clearly offended. "Excuse me," I said, "give us a moment." Ethan's tone left no room for negotiation. After a tense pause, the brunette muttered something under her breath and walked toward the bar, heels snapping sharply with each step. Julia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Ethan leaned forward, eyes locking on hers, voice dropping low enough that only she could hear. "Now tell me the truth, Julia. Who sent you?" Her pulse thundered. The plan was unraveling faster than she'd imagined. And yet, sitting here, with those steel-gray eyes fixed on her, the real danger wasn't being caught. The real danger was that a part of her didn't want to lie anymore. Julia's palms dampened against the smooth linen of the tablecloth. Ethan's gaze pinned her like a hawk tracking prey, unrelenting and sharp. The restaurant's candlelight softened nothing about him. "You're not just some stranger wandering in here," he said evenly. "You knew my name. You knew about the blind date. So, Julia," he leaned in, his voice dangerously quiet. "Who sent you?" Her pulse thundered. She had two choices. Lie and risk tripping over herself later, or confess and watch the entire evening blow up in her face. Neither promised safety. Her lips parted, but before the truth could spill out, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, jaw tightening. Then, unexpectedly, the storm in his expression eased. "Excuse me." He stood, towering above the table. "Stay." His command was firm, not a suggestion. And then he walked away, phone pressed to his ear. Julia exhaled shakily, relief colliding with panic. She had a reprieve, but only a temporary one. She glanced toward the bar where the brunette, Ethan's real date, sat fuming, glaring daggers in her direction. Julia forced herself to look away. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. A message from the client. "Well, did you ruin it yet? Don't disappoint me, Julia." She shut her eyes, guilt burning her chest. What had she gotten herself into? It was supposed to be simple. A little humiliation, a ruined dinner, a bruised ego. She hadn't expected him to see through her, or worse, to make her feel like her heart was betraying her every time he looked at her. When Ethan returned, he looked different. Tired, almost. The edge in his expression had softened, replaced by something heavier. "Sorry," he muttered, sliding back into his seat. "My son's nanny. He had a nightmare." Julia blinked. "You have a son." His gaze flickered to hers, guarded but honest. 6 years old. Alex. He's everything. The quiet pride in his voice caught her off guard. It wasn't rehearsed or performed. It was real. Suddenly, the image of a cold, smug CEO didn't fit anymore. "That's why you're here tonight, isn't it?" she asked softly. The blind date. Because of him. He studied her, as though deciding how much to reveal. Then, with a slow nod, he admitted, "My sister thinks I should try again. That Alex needs more than just me. A family." Julia's throat tightened. She hadn't expected this kind of honesty. Not from him. Not from the man she was supposed to sabotage. "Do you," she asked before she could stop herself, "think you need that too?" For a moment, Silence stretched between them, heavy with meaning. Ethan's eyes didn't leave hers. I think what I need is someone I can trust. The words landed like a blade. Julia swallowed hard, guilt pressing against her ribs until it hurt. Here he was, opening up, when all she had to give was a secret that could shatter everything. Before she could answer, the brunette reappeared, heels striking like warning bells. She folded her arms, glaring between them. Ethan, I don't know what's going on here, but if you'd rather spend your night with her, then just say so. Julia braced for him to choose. To send her away, to expose her. Instead, Ethan's lips curved into a smirk, slow, deliberate. His eyes never left Julia's. I already have. The brunette gasped, spinning on her heel before storming out. Gasps and whispers rippled through the restaurant, but Julia could only sit frozen, staring at Ethan. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Now, Julia, you're going to tell me everything. And she knew there was no escape left. The restaurant seemed quieter now, though Julia knew it was only her imagination. Every sound, the clink of silverware, the low hum of conversation, the distant pop of a cork, faded beneath the thunder of her own heartbeat. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table, gray eyes locked onto hers with a focus that made it impossible to look away. You've danced around the truth long enough, he said, voice calm but razor sharp. Who sent you? Why are you here? Julia's throat tightened. She could still lie. She could spin another excuse, blame it on coincidence, laugh it off as a silly misunderstanding. But his eyes, so piercing, so unyielding, warned her he'd cut through any fabrication she dared to weave. She swallowed hard. You're not going to like it. Try me. Her nails dug into her palms beneath the table. The words tangled in her chest, fighting to stay hidden, but the weight of them was crushing her. Finally, she forced them out. I was paid to ruin your date. Ethan didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply sat there, staring at her as if she'd just confessed to stealing the moon. Paid, he repeated, voice flat. Julia nodded, shame burning through her. I didn't know you. I didn't know anything about you, just that someone wanted tonight to fail. I was supposed to humiliate you, embarrass you enough that you'd never want to see her again. His jaw flexed, anger simmering beneath the surface, though he kept it contained. That restraint was somehow worse than an outburst. Who, he demanded quietly, would pay you to do that? Julia looked down at the table, unable to meet his gaze. I can't tell you. The silence stretched, taut as a wire about to snap. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. So let me get this straight. You walk into my evening, sabotage my date, sit here and, what? Pretend, flirt. His voice dropped, steel-laced with something darker. And all of it was a lie. Her eyes shot up, desperate. No, not all of it. Convince me. His gaze bore into her. Julia's voice shook, but she held his stare. When I sat down, it was just a job. I told myself you were another arrogant millionaire who deserved to be taken down a notch. But then you started talking about your son, about family, and her words faltered, heart cracking open. I wasn't pretending anymore, not with you. For the first time since her confession, Ethan's expression flickered, conflict flashing in his eyes. He wanted to believe her. She could see it, but trust wasn't something easily given, not by a man like him. Finally, he leaned back, crossing his arms. You realize how insane this is, don't you? You expect me to sit here and believe that somewhere between ruining my night and lying to my face, you suddenly grew a conscience. Julia flinched but nodded. Yes, because it's the truth. He studied her for a long, unbearable moment. Then he stood, sliding his chair back with controlled precision. The sound echoed like a verdict. I don't know what game you're playing, Julia, he said, voice clipped, but I don't gamble with liars. Her chest caved, panic clawing at her ribs. She rose to her feet, desperate to make him understand. Ethan, please. But he was already turning away, his tall frame cutting a sharp line through the room as he headed for the exit. Julia stood frozen, every eye in the restaurant heavy on her. The mission had been a success. She'd ruined his date. But she hadn't expected to ruin herself in the process. Because somewhere between the lies and the truth, she'd fallen for the man she was paid to destroy. And now, he hated her for it.